Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Re-Federalist Report. I am Brady, aka the War Hamster. Joining me today is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
And as always on the Re-Federalist Report, we are going to talk about constitutional issues, both historical and present day, always with the ongoing aim of restoring the Federal Republic as was the original intent of the Constitution. Today, we are jumping into Trump's executive orders. This is our second attempt at this. We started taping this the other day.
They don't need to know that.
And I got yanked out on an emergency, so right back at it.
They don't need to know that.
Let's jump into the big one that's making all the headlines, and that, of course, is the Birthright Citizenship case. Donald Trump's executive order was I'm going to share it with you right here. He did about 200 executive orders. We're going to get through as many of those as we can today. But the big one here is protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. And notice they're a lot more concise than they used to be.
Remember, this is the guy that was behind knocking that budget bill down from 1,500 pages down to 100 and so many.
Yeah, they ought to be short enough that the average person with a high school diploma can read it and know what they say.
Well, Thomas Jefferson used to say things about that regarding legislation. He argued that that legislation that was voluminous was so in order to confuse people, to hide things, and so Thomas Jefferson was a real fan of being concise.
Yeah, and as you know, I'd like to joke around about they ought to go back to making laws on the tablets where they have to chisel them, and then we can be nice and concise, like "Thou shalt not kill,"
or even just on parchment. I mean, that's part of the reason why in Article 1, Section 8, they didn't write the Congress shall have the power over and over and over. They just put two, because you got to handwrite that stuff down. That gets burdensome. But anyway.
Well, that's just like every single one of these executive orders is going to start with, by the authority vested in me as president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. And that brings up a couple of points before we get into this. What exactly is an executive order and what is it not? And also, when we look at these executive orders, it's always going to be from the original intent of the Constitution standpoint. So we're going to ask the question, does the president even have the power to be weighing in on this subject, or is it outside his authority? Is this break the Constitution in other ways? And that's how we're going to look at these things from a constitutional standpoint, not from a political one. But first of all, Doug, exactly what is and what isn't an executive order?
Well, executive orders are not mentioned in the Constitution. They emerged as presidential presidential proclamations back during George Washington's presidency. The Thanksgiving Proclamation technically is an executive order. The term executive order didn't show up until after the turn of the century, the 20th century, after 1900. I believe around 19-teens, 1920s, and that term emerged during what's called the Progressive Era. So the word order being associated with it, I don't believe is something that the founders would have used, but it's something that the progressives of the progressive movement would love to use because they want a stronger government. They want to put out the illusion of an order by a president. Executive orders basically are proclamations, like Reagan's proclamation of a National Day of Prayer. It holds no law. It's not legally binding. You're not required on the National Day of Prayer to say a prayer or be arrested.
So even though they're calling it an order, it is not actually creating a law.
It is not creating a law. It's not an order, and I'll explain why that's the case in a minute. And then the other reason function of an executive order is to give the executive branch instructions on how to execute the laws of the United States. Article 2 says that the President of the United States shall faithfully execute the laws of the United States, and since everything is done in writing and there has to be instructions from the president to his branch, that's what the executive orders are supposed to be for. Getting back to the not legally binding part, Article 1, Section 1 explains that to us, because it says that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Therefore, if all legislative powers, in other words, the powers to legislate, to make law, to modify law, or to repeal law, anything that's legally binding, lawful, has to begin with Congress, then that means an executive order cannot have that power.
Well, what about the I have a pen and a phone clause that's found somewhere in there?
Yeah, right. And, the battle over strengthening the power of the presidency, the power of the executive branch, is something that, was an issue out the gate. Now, we really saw it kind of under Adams a little bit, John Adams, and then it reemerged under Andrew Jackson. Abraham Lincoln, actually, they call him the benevolent dictator, because he used such the executive branch such a powerful way. Then you get Teddy Roosevelt, our first progressive, and he wanted to use the branch as, well, there you go. It's the first time we went over 1,000 executive orders right there.
That's more than twice. That's more than like 5 times more than any other previous president.
George Washington did like 8. And then after him, you couldn't even get to a dozen for the next like 5 or 6. There you go. So Andrew Jackson then jumped it up to 12. He's the first one to go to the double digits. And, well, remember, he's trying to wield more power. Ulysses S. Grant, which was a little bit on the heavy-handed side when it comes to power in the hands of the executive. Teddy Roosevelt, but I think the big one would be FDR. FDR was over 3,000. Yeah,
he was in there a long time, but he also breaks it down by how many per year. So
and here's the thing too, and this is actually deceiving a little bit, these numbers, because they only count executive orders, but you also have executive memos, executive letters, and there's 1 or 2 other devices they can use, and they are essentially executive orders also. And one of the stories that comes out of that is Barack Obama, who wanted to be, show that he was not Bush, and Bush was the one who was out of control, and Bush was the one that wanted to wield so many executive orders. And so when Barack Obama realized and saw that his executive order number was approaching that of George W. Bush's, suddenly his issuance of executive orders went down. And you'll notice in his second term, it is less than the first term. And he began to issue executive letters and executive memos. He actually issued many more than George W. Bush, but they classified them as letters and memos so that they wouldn't get counted. So once again, these numbers can be very deceptive sometimes.
Yeah, the Biden number 162 seems low, but I think they did some of that sleight of hand with him as well in terms of reclassifying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And,
well, 162, heck, 2/3 of that, if that was an accurate number, was within the first couple weeks.
Well, Trump has now done about 200 just in the first 3 or 4 days.
And Reagan had a high number, but Reagan and Trump, to their defense, most of theirs is to undo the ones of the previous president.
Yeah, and I was about to say that about Trump. A lot of the ones he did today undid a lot of Biden's. I know he had one executive order that undid like 75 all in one, which was nice.
But so executive orders, once again, they're not technically in the Constitution. They are a constitutional tool. The president does need to have the ability to make a proclamation and to communicate instructions to his executive branch. But as I said earlier, Article 1, Section 1 tells us that it can't be legally binding, not hold the power of law. And I remember, and I'll leave this segment with this, Gavin Newsom, because governors also have executive orders, and Gavin Newsom gave a bunch of executive orders, mandates during a particular period in history where everybody thought they were getting sick, COVID. And I remember him standing up in a speech. He's got the mic in front of him and he says, "You will heed these mandates." And I looked up the word heed, and heed means take into consideration. And that's it right there. You will take into consideration. It holds no power of law. Newsom, of course, was playing with words. He hoped everybody thought that heed meant you better do it. But nonetheless, leaders in history have wielded the executive order in a manner that's not intended, and they do intend to make you think that you are hereby ordered to do something, and that hence the name executive order. And just understand, heed, you will take into consideration.
All right, well, let's jump into this first big one that's making all the headlines. And once again, this is protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. Section 1.
Better known as birthright citizenship, folks.
Yeah, and for the record, we're not going to go as deep into this as we did previously. We did a longer version of this not too long ago, a couple months, because we knew this was something that was going to come up this year.
Right.
You can find that on my Rumble page on Re-Federalist number 16, Birthright Citizenship, where we did full hour deep depth, but we're not going to go quite that far this time. Okay. Reading the first paragraph. Section 1, the purpose. The privilege of the United States. First of all, Doug, this is talking about birthright citizenship, naturalization, all that. The first question is, does the President of the United States have authority over this topic? Should he even be weighing in on it?
Well, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, plus citizenship is mentioned in in Article 2 when it talks about natural-born citizenship, and it mentions citizenship there. Also, Article 1, Section 8, naturalization. This is a federal issue.
Absolutely. Once again, the federal government was created for three main reasons. One is to handle international affairs. Second is to interstate disputes. I would say immigration would be considered international affairs.
Well, and the thing is, the way I like to explain it is the federal government's job is basically anything that directly affects, either promotes, protects, or provides regarding or preserves the union. It's all about the union of states. If it is outside the union and it is something that an individual state should be responsible for, that doesn't affect the union on how they handle it, then it's none of the federal government's business. It all comes down to, does it influence a union? Citizenship is something that you're not just a citizen of your state, but you're a citizen of the union. Hence, that makes it a federal issue.
Yeah, they're about to say that specifically in the 14th Amendment, which was a reiteration for the most part of what was understood to be the citizenship clause at the time. The privilege of the United States citizenship is a priceless and profound gift. The 14th Amendment states, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside.
All right, stop there. So I like the fact that you emphasize the word and he's talked to me enough that he knows that's a big deal there. The word and being a creating the idea that there is a second requirement. Born or naturalized, and must be something that goes along with it. So right there in the language, it tells you being born on American soil is not enough. There is something else. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Senator Trumbull, one of the writers of this clause during the 1860s, mid 1860s, when he went before Congress, because the amendments, the articles were all written in committee. The leaders of this particular committee, Senator Trumbull, Senator Howard, had to go before Congress to explain themselves, to explain the language before it got approved. And there were times with these things where they'd go back to committee and they'd come out to the floor again and all that. And so when asked, what do you mean by subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Trumbull said, we mean We mean not just jurisdiction, but full jurisdiction, meaning full allegiance. And then Howard on May 30th, 1866, and a couple of other times, basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that exempt from citizenship then would be Indians not taxed, the children of foreigners and aliens, and the children of diplomats and ambassadors and other foreign ministers and consuls. And so what we're seeing here is that along with being born American soil and subject, there's some type of allegiance. And that's, if you're familiar with, if you are familiar with the oath to become a citizen, and if you've ever gone to one of those citizenship ceremonies for a naturalized citizen, one of the things you'll notice is in that is a renouncement of one's prior citizenship. That satisfies the and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, because it has to be full allegiance to the United States.
I actually have I found Howard's quote, so I'm going to share that with you real quick.
Okay.
Pulled this off of a Techno Fog Substack. He does a pretty good job.
Yeah, and just for your all's edification yourselves, if you want to do your own research, his testimony and Trumbull's testimony is in the Congressional Record, and the Congressional Record of the time is called the Congressional Globe, and you can find that actually through a Congress.gov site. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. He raised this amendment, which I have offered, is simply declaratory of what I regard as the law of the land already. Again, it's redundant, he said. That every person born within the limits of the United States and subject to the jurisdiction is by virtue of natural law and national law a citizen of the United States. In bold. This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. Which is basically what Doug just said.
How about that? Well, he left out on that one, Indians not taxed, but you'll see that a couple times in there too.
Yeah, and we saw it again affirmed just shortly thereafter with the slaughterhouse cases, Supreme Court cases of the 1880s. Or is it 1873, I think. The phrase subject to its jurisdiction was intended to exclude from its operation children of ministers, consuls, and citizens or subjects of foreign states born within the United States. So that reiterated that there were exceptions.
Well, and when I teach my classes, this is one of the things I explain. I mean, this is just common sense. If you, and let's just use you as an example, my fair viewer, you and your spouse or your spouse of long ago or future spouse, depending, I guess, on how old you are and your status, you travel to another country. You're on vacation, or maybe it's a military visit or whatever, and you and your spouse have a child on the soil of that country. Is that child a citizen of that country? No, you're there temporarily. Your allegiance is still to the United States. Therefore, the citizenship of the child, who cannot decide for themselves what their allegiance is going to reflect what yours is.
That's exactly the argument that former Congressman Justin Amash is making the other day on Twitter. And he talks about this. He says Trump's odd claim is that a child born in the United States without at least one parent who is a lawful permanent resident or citizen is not subject to the jurisdiction. He says that is simply false. He goes down there and talks about illegal aliens. He goes, I include the word almost before. Hang on, let me get it where it is.
Right there under your mouse.
Yeah. He's interpreting subject to the jurisdiction as someone who can be, can you
within the borders or subject to the laws.
Yeah, here it is. Because they have immunity that may or may not be involved in the country. Now, you may not like the fact that the Constitution broadly grants birthright citizenship. It doesn't, because he's trying to say that, if someone's here illegally, we can still arrest them and try them, so they're subject to our jurisdiction. But the key is it's not subject to the full jurisdiction. They still owe their allegiance elsewhere.
Well, and the thing is, this is an attempt to interpret. Yeah, but what it says, we interpret based on our language today. That's not what was originally intended. Remember, the Constitution is a contract. And when it comes to contract law, what was originally intended at the time it was written is what matters here. And you can read the minutes of the meetings to develop the contract to help understand that. And that's exactly what we're doing. The Howard and Trumbull tell us in their own words what they meant. And to say, well, we interpret it to be something else is ridiculous. They told you what it meant. And but we see there's a narrative that's trying to be met here. And so the original intent is being discarded.
So there's a couple other good arguments that are put down. Oops, that's the wrong one. Bear with me. A couple other good arguments on this, just to finish up the argument part of it. (1881), Alex Porter Morse concluded, "The children of aliens, the accident of whose birth occurs in American soil, and minors cormorant in the country, are invested with the national character of the parent. Aliens are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States only to a limited extent." And that is the big argument against what Justin Amash is saying.
And you could also read the Civil Rights Act of 1866. It also contains language that is very similar to what we've been saying.
And that's that the 1866 law was basically the impetus for this to be included in the 14th Amendment because it was being misinterpreted.
Well, and originally the purpose of putting a citizenship clause in the first place was to make sure that the children of those who have been enslaved and now were emancipated, thanks to the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution after the war between the states, were recognized as citizens. There was a fear that there would be segments of the population, states that would say, well, they're even though they were born here, they need to be sent back to Africa or something like that. And so they wanted to make sure it was understood. No, they're citizens. They fall within our jurisdiction, and they are entitled to the same privileges and immunities that any other citizen would be entitled to. That was the reason. But also, Howard and Trumbull knew when they were writing this, and Congress knew, that this would become the clause about citizenship generally. So they realized they had to make sure that they wrote it for all of those things, and they needed to make sure that was written in such a way that it also protected us. Howard and Trumbull are a couple of interesting characters. When it came to a lot of issues, looking back historically, I want to slap them upside the head. But they got it right on this one, and they were trying to abide by what was originally intended. Because you got to remember, you look back in time, there was issues with people like Tories who didn't have allegiance. And that's the reason why a natural-born citizen was included in the Constitution. It was all about allegiance, and there was a fear of those not having allegiance sabotaging our republic. And this was just a carrying through of that belief system that goes all the way back to the founders.
The last argument is the one that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Miller in 1981 made on a similar case. If a stranger or traveler passing through or temporarily residing in this country, who has not himself been naturalized and who claims to owe no allegiance to our government, has a child born here which goes out of the country with its father, such a child is not a citizen of the United States because it was not subject to its jurisdiction. So,
so this has got me thinking for a second. Because and we haven't gotten this far yet, but in the executive order, it talks about those who are here temporarily. And that's what we're talking about here, where the persons that are having the child, they're not subject to jurisdiction. They haven't shown no indication legally to even obtain that jurisdiction. They have not filed any immigration paperwork, whatever. And so for all intents and purposes, they're to be here temporarily. They're visitors. And like I said earlier, vacation or military. It came to mind, or maybe someone who's here on a, student visa. Maybe two parents here on student visas. They're here temporarily. And then they have a child in Oakland. Would that child then not be a citizen? Of course, referring to Kamala Harris. Just saying. But see, people the reason why this is such an issue with the left is because the collectivistic ideas that they're pushing come from a foreign source. They are not uniquely American. They are foreign ideas being brought, and who typically is going to have foreign ideas? Those who have foreign parentage, those who have foreign teachings or education. Of course, now all the foreign teachings and education seems to be embedded in our own system. That's beside the point. And that was what they were trying to guard against.
Yeah, it's, in practicality, let's say my mom and dad are traveling, I don't know, to Argentina when I'm born. That doesn't make me an Argentine citizen. It makes me an American citizen, even though I wasn't born on U.S. soil. I don't have to go through any naturalization process because both my parents were citizens.
Right.
That same case with an illegal alien. They are citizens of someplace else. Yeah, different countries have slightly different ways of looking at it.
Now, some people may point out, well, gosh, Doug, but if you're born in a different country, international law says that when you're 12, you can apply for dual citizenship with that country. That's the world. American exceptionalism, we're an exception to the rule. We do not follow necessarily their ideas. American ideas, American law was uniquely established and should be uniquely entertained and understood.
Yeah, like once upon a time, I was looking at moving to one of the Caribbean islands and just sail off into the sunset. So I did some homework on it. And if I would have gotten my Cayman Island citizenship, I would have had to denounce my U.S. citizenship. You cannot have both. It's interesting. Every person, I guess, with something like 1/8 or 1/16 Jewish descent is automatically a citizen of Israel. So everyone talks about we've got all these dual citizens in Congress. That doesn't necessarily mean you've got loyalty to another country. I think it's case by case situation.
And the United States doesn't recognize dual citizenship either. Anyway.
The other argument we're going to see quite a bit over the next few months, because this is going to be litigated, and it already has, and we'll get into that in a second. 18 blue state attorneys general filed suit, and a judge has already rendered a decision. But the big argument you're going to hear coming from the side that's on the wrong side of this issue is they're going to quote Wong Kim Ark.
Wong Kim Ark, 1898, and the argument is that is the judicial case that has codified the idea of birthright citizenship. All you need to do is be born on American soil and you're automatically a citizen. Except the problem is that's not what that case says. The judicial opinion also in that case recognized the word and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And in the case of young Wong Kim Ark, who was born in San Francisco, his parents he's of Chinese parentage. And at the time, there was a law that did not allow the Chinese to become citizens. So his parents did the next best thing. They became permanent residents. Green card, for some of you, if you wondered. Permanent residency is what they achieved. Then he was born to parents so they had done everything they could to show that allegiance. They weren't leaving. They were here permanently. And so that satisfied the and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And now they're saying, no, it's because you're just born. The and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is now. Why is that being hammered down by me so heavily? Illegal aliens are having babies on American soil. They have shown no intent to have any allegiance or permanency in the United States through any application of paperwork, immigration protocols, anything. They broke a law to get here. Not exactly a way of showing that you have allegiance to a country. To break, the first thing you do when you enter the country is break one of their laws. And if you're not willing to file immigration paperwork, you're not willing to go through any of the immigration protocols, then that does not show any intent to have permanency. So that's really where this all comes down to.
So as I said, 18 blue state attorneys general filed suit already, like basically the day after. They had it ready to go. Everyone knew this was coming. Okay, this is not a surprise executive order.
And most of those states are the usual suspects.
Yeah.
California, Oregon, Illinois, so on and so forth.
A judge on January 23rd, yesterday, blocked Donald Trump's order limiting birthright citizenship. U.S. District Judge John Cohner, he's a Reagan appointee apparently, at the hearing in Seattle, surprise, surprise, issued a temporary restraining order that prohibits the Trump administration, at least for now, from enforcing the order, which Trump signed under. The judge says, this is a blatantly unconstitutional order. Well, maybe not. Let's talk about which court has jurisdiction over this. This is a district judge in a state of Washington, making an imposition on federal law for the entire country. We've seen that quite a bit over the last 10 years. Not necessarily, you can do an argument whether states' rights or the federal courts have jurisdiction over some things. In this case, this is a state suing the federal government, and it should directly go to where?
Well, here's the thing. Did they do it as the state, or did they do it as the AG? In other words, on the docket, is it named as Washington and Oregon and California and Illinois and New York, or is it named as the Attorney General of California and using their name as the person who is behind the lawsuit? And I know it doesn't seem like a big deal distinction, but it is. If it is the state itself, the state is what is listed as the party, then it has to go directly to the United States Supreme Court. Article 3 says that in any case that a state is a party, that the United States Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. An officer of the state, however, may file in one of the lower courts, and district court typically would be where it would start, because they have both original and appellate jurisdiction. And your circuit courts typically only have appellate jurisdiction. Appellate meaning that it was at another court and it's been appealed and it moved up. Original jurisdiction meaning it's a court in which a case can begin. Municipal courts would not have any appellate jurisdiction, but they do have original. But something like the Supreme Court has both. So that's really the question. Now, what's driving me nuts here is the argument is you can't change a constitution with an executive order or a law. And a matter of fact, and I felt bad yesterday because there was I don't always watch the news sites that align with me. I like to watch other news sites too. Got to hear what they're saying. And the person on the screen is saying exactly that. You can't just go around changing the Constitution with an executive order, but, Trump thinks he's a dictator and he can just do whatever he wants and blah, 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 blah. But it's in the Constitution, birthright. And I'm like, no, it's not. And my dogs are like running to another room. They think I'm mad at them because I'm shouting. I'm like, it's not in the Constitution. But that's really the key here. Is birthright citizenship in the Constitution? Is it being interpreted accurately? Or is it not in the Constitution, and that's an interpretation? Now, if it's just an interpretation, then Trump is not changing the Constitution. He's simply saying, no, this is what it says instead of that. I mean, it's almost like someone, arguing about a lie, and then when you tell the truth, and then they hold you in contempt for not agreeing with the lie. I mean, that's almost how it feels like here. And does he have the authority? Absolutely, because it's not law. It's just an interpretation.
All right, let's move on to some of the other, like I said, there's 200 executive orders signed.
Well, let's see, and we got 200 minutes left right now. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Now, I'll start they're listed on the whitehouse.gov page in chronological order. So
I'm assuming, and this is not only for my own edification, but that of the viewer here. So we're going to get what we can, and then the important ones, and then are we going to go back to get others later, or what was the plan?
We certainly can. Let's see how far we get through it. If we got to do another show like early next week on this, I'm more than happy to.
Well, birthright citizenship we knew would take a while to talk about. It took half an hour as it was, but some of these others maybe not so much. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll go through them relatively quickly. There's some stuff that definitely are constitutional questions, and once again, we'll be asking the question: does this executive order exceed executive authority? Should the president even be weighing in on the topic, or is it somebody else's authority he's stepping on? All right, I'm just going to the whitehouse.gov, all the presidential actions. And the most recent one, of course, is yesterday. This is newest to oldest as we go down. Yesterday, we got removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence. This is just a commercial situation. All the reasons, and what is he actually saying? They're addressing the SAFE Act and a couple of others, basically make it easier for the development of artificial intelligence. We all saw the press conference with Larry Ellison.
Allowed to freely develop in the private sector through free market means rather than control. And let me say this real quick as you begin that. One of the reasons why big tech has moved over to Trump, guys that you never thought would, like Zuckerberg and Bezos, is because in meetings with Biden and the Democrats regarding AI, artificial intelligence, the attitude of the government was it's a military thing and it's science. Therefore, it must be controlled by government, and that any innovations has to be done through the federal government, and that Biden was even threatening to get it labeled as a science in order to make sure that happens. And for the big tech guys, AI is the next big boom, and they stand to do really well. And here's the government saying, "Yeah, no, you can't play with this toy. This one belongs to us." Now that said, I've had a lot of people very upset with me, saying, "Well, Doug, how can you support Trump? Not only unleashing artificial intelligence without any type of regulatory control, but also working with people like Ellison, in creating these." Well, it comes down to this, because Doug, this can be used for surveillance. So you're right, but so if something is dangerous, we're supposed to then not participate in it. I mean, should we have then not made the atom bomb? Somebody else was, and we want to be the leader. Artificial intelligence is a tool, just like I think this is how Trump was looking at it. This is a tool, and if we aren't the ones that are at the forefront of this tool, and we trust ourselves to treat it properly more than somebody else, if they take the lead, then it needs to be us, just like with the atom bomb originally. We want to be the wielders first, be the innovators at the top, because that way we can keep it from being misused globally in the future. I think that's kind of what he's thinking here. And the thing is, it does belong in the private sector, and the federal government has no authority anyway to be dictating. Absolutely, the barriers should be removed. It's a very constitutional executive order, and if anything, there should even be a law put in place, not allowing the agencies to even, create any. I mean, and now we said, well, Doug, you really think that there should be no regulations? Well, this is something that they're going to have to discuss. Should there be certain regulations, like an SEC type situation where, you create an agency, even though technically it'd be unconstitutional, to keep things from going completely out of control? I don't know. We're not there yet.
There needs to be some kind of oversight.
Yeah, but from a practical sense, I get that.
There needs to be guardrails. But going back to your argument, this conversation has been going on for a while as technology keeps just rapidly growing. One of the biggest fears, of course, is this whole technocratic transhumanist, merge of human beings with computers. Now, it's inevitable we're going to get to that point technologically. And a couple of the leaders saying, okay, if we're going to get there, let's make sure we do it in as humanistic way as possible. And some of the big leaders of that movement, the humanistic version of technologists, are Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who coincidentally both have Donald Trump's ear. Thiel indirectly with J.D. Vance, who he was Vance's mentor. But I think that probably has a lot of influence on it. This is part of the law. It's a long-standing discussion over how to actually harness technology and use it for the good of mankind, as opposed to the dangerous side of Skynet.
Well, and the thing is, it's sort of like politics. There's an old saying when it comes to politics. If you don't get involved with politics, eventually politics will get involved with you. And that's kind of what we're thinking here. While I see the dangers, I'm just glad that he named it. What Stargate, is that what he named it? Yeah, it's better. It's better than naming it Skynet. But But
let's move on. Let's move on from this one.
But nonetheless, yeah.
I'm going to skip over President's Council Advisors on Science Technology. Here's a big one. Declassification of records concerning the assassinations of President JFK. They also were doing Bobby Kennedy's and Martin Luther King. A lot of researchers are going to be very happy about this. I think
there's already been a little bit that has snuck out already, and what we've been thinking all along, that LBJ is starting to look like. Is there any need to keep this classified?
I don't think there ever was.
I don't think there ever was. I think you might be onto something there.
Yeah, well, if you really, we're not going to do a whole show on JFK assassination.
But what in the nutshell, what it does, though, is it reveals something that some people are unwilling to admit. That there are often elements in the United States government that are, for lack of a better way of saying it, the bad guys. That our agencies don't walk on water. They are often doing things that are not good. And that elements within certain segments of our government or parties act in a manner that's surprising to us, that are corrupt and even murderous. But it does need to come to light. We do need to understand that certain ways of thinking, certain ideologies perhaps lean towards doing certain things in a certain way. And I think this will expose that in many ways.
You know, that a couple of years ago, Doug, one of Doug's Constitution classes out in Fallbrook, had asked me to come speak on the JFK assassination. And that was a really fun class, good questions and all that. I've also done a number of shows on my channel discussing the JFK assassination in a lot more detail than we're going to go into here. Just 2 months ago, Colonel Towner Watkins and I did one on the same channel about the JFK assassination. It was on the anniversary. We decided to do a show, going into details. If you want to know my thoughts on everything from the Warren Commission, who actually, was it a lone gunman versus multiple? It's all in this video, so that's worth checking out. And just to give you a sneak preview, no, it was not a lone gunman. And yes, the Warren Commission report was full of what. But that's not what we're doing here today, so let's go back to the executive order.
I will refrain from my opinions on that. We'll do that on another show sometime.
Okay. I'm going to skip over the clemency and the pardons because we've talked about pardons quite a bit. I like this one, designation of Ansar Allah as a foreign terrorist organization. These are the Houthis in Yemen, who basically have a bunch of, who was the Pentagon official described them as a bunch of savages, a bunch of desert savages who don't even have their own country, which is all true, but they somehow are able to put together missiles that are keeping the United States Navy, most powerful in the world, keeping them at bay and controlling, basically shutting down the sea commerce in a big swath of very, very busy section of the ocean in the Red Sea.
Well, this is actually an executive order I was real happy to see, and I'll try to keep this short, but I'm a firm believer that we have not been taking Islam as serious as we should be. We have this idea, when I say we, I don't mean me, I mean generally as a society, that Islam is the religion of peace, but every once in a while someone gets radicalized by fundamentalists. The religion of peace calls itself that because someday when everybody's Muslim, there will be peace. That's their attitude. Otherwise, you will become Islamic by the sword. That is what the ideology teaches, is a political ideology that calls itself a religion, and it is a very dangerous one. And every single organization that is associated with Islam directly, in my opinion, is either a terrorist organization or a terrorist funding organization, or at least an enabler. We need to be taking Islam seriously. Islam is not something that we should be not caring about. We've watched what has happened throughout Europe. And we saw what happened in New Orleans. And I believe that if we don't take it seriously, if we don't start sanctioning a lot of these organizations and labeling them as terrorist organizations and treating them as such. And if we don't get the border secure, we're going to have terrorist attacks within the United States, unlike what you could even imagine.
Yeah, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I mentioned a guy by the name of Jim Simpson who's written about what he calls the red-green axis. Red being
I've met him personally, and we used to email each other. I have to get back in touch with him because he's definitely his expertise is definitely something we need to be listening to today.
Yeah, we should have him on the show as a guest, and just on this topic alone.
Jim Simpson's red-green axis was a large part of what Trevor Loudon's first film, Enemies Within, was about. The Enemies Within film by Trevor Loudon was not only about Marxism, but also, that's the red, but also the green, Islam, and how many of our senators and representatives in the House of Representatives are either directly tied to Islamic terror groups, Islamism, or communism, or socialist groups of that nature. And according to that film, just to give you a kind of a desire to see this film, I think you should, is that according to Trevor Loudon, at least this is at the time, this is going back to 20, I think it was 2011 or something like that. It was approaching Obama, but or during Obama, that at least 100 members of our Congress, Senate and House, could not pass the background check that is required to clean toilets in the very buildings they serve in.
I'll put the link up to a video of Jim Simpson's giving a speech on the red-green axis. It's about an hour and a half long. Mm-hmm. And if you guys want to go more deeper into that, but it's a good topic, and I'm glad we stopped on that one.
Yeah, Jim Simpson's an important individual to be listening to, and I definitely give my thumbs up on anything he has to say.
Very good. Skipping over nominations and grants of clemency, here's a big one. Ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. This is basically Trump saying no more affirmative action anywhere. Now, the question is, does he have that authority? Basically says, purpose. Long-standing federal civil rights laws protect individual Americans from discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Correct. These civil rights protections serve as a bedrock supporting equality of opportunity for all Americans. As president, I have a solemn duty to ensure that these laws are enforced for the benefit of Americans. He's correct. And affirmative action is reverse discrimination. It always has been. It's based on, giving one person advantage over another based on immutable characteristics. That is not okay.
And the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken, shot down affirmative action not long ago.
Yeah, they did. And basically, this is saying that the federal government, where is it saying? The following executive actions are hereby revoked. Executive order, federal address to environmental justice, blah, blah, blah. He's revoking a bunch of other executive orders that were affirmative action.
The presidential memorandum there, that's one of those executive orders that's not an executive order I was talking about.
Yeah. So basically what this is doing, it is reversing a whole bunch of previous executive orders, which is great.
And that he has the authority to do. Mm-hmm. And but if there is law that was made, that law has to be reversed by Congress.
Talking about going after the Department of Labor here, they're promoting diversity, holding federal contractors responsible.
That's within the executive branch. He has every authority to do that. Plus, all those executive orders being reversed, he could do that.
Yeah, no. What really happens is this is it's a shakedown. It's what it's always been. Yeah. The government says you've got to follow. We can't tell you what to do with your company, but you can't do government contracts if you don't do what we say, and that just absolutely never should have been allowed. That's supposedly done.
Yeah, it's sort of like highway funds. By the way, you're going to have a 55 speed limit, or we're not going to give you any highway funds.
This is interesting.
Same crap.
Here it says, encouraging the private sector to end illegal DEI discrimination preferences. He's not ordering because he can't.
Right.
But he's going to encourage them. Probably carrot and stick type approach.
Yeah. What this is, for those of you who may not understand, is what it's going after is the DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion idea. The transsexual, the woke stuff. And one of the things I always appreciated about Trump, and I appreciated about Reagan, is it never was with these guys identity politics. Is we as Americans, what are you capable of? What is your merit? What have you done? And everybody in America is capable of achieving. Now, if someone says, yeah, but Doug, some people are born, I get it, and they're born poor, whatever, and it's a tougher road. And that's just the reality of life. But in the end, you have to do it through merit. And please don't tell me that it's impossible for someone who was born in such and such poverty, and that they can't get to the other wherever they want to go to achieve their dreams. I can't count how many stories of rags to riches. Ben Carson is a great example. This guy grew up in absolute poverty, in very rough neighborhood, neurosurgeon, and ran for president, and is still in the spotlight.
Thomas Sowell is my favorite example.
Thomas Sowell is my favorite economist.
Yeah, he's up there. The danger of this, of course, there's two. One is because this is an executive order. If we get a Democrat back in the White House,
flip it right back.
Right? Reverse it. Well, it might be a little harder to flip it back, because there's going to be some litigation involving this. But the other issue is, we saw this a few years ago. Was it Harvard or Yale lost a court case about their admissions policies? Basically, they were, you had to get like a 5.0 if you were Asian to get in, and there were lower standards for others. Right. So what did the Harvard or Yale, whatever the school is, they followed the letter of the law, but they didn't follow the intent. They just started doing affirmative action by another, became more qualitative and became less subjective, I guess more subjective. And long story short, they didn't end a round of the ruling, and they are still discriminating. So it's going to be hard to enforce this.
These types of elements, one of the things that they always do is they try to game the system. So you got to make the system nearly impossible to game. And that's what I think Trump is trying to do here.
Yeah, if we can get, you almost have to change the whole culture of people that think that anything should be, and that's going to take time. But because this will be litigated, perhaps we'll get a Supreme Court ruling that will go the right direction. And I'm pretty sure this Supreme Court will not rule that discrimination is legal, because they have, in the past, they have done the opposite.
Oh my goodness, I tell you, man, so many of these issues, I just wish we had a amendment to the Constitution, but we haven't had an amendment ratified since 1992, and that one wasn't even anything new. It goes all the way back to the Bill of Rights. So,
oh, you didn't hear Joe Biden ratified the 28th Amendment right on his way out the door.
Yeah, no, yeah, I actually did. I did a segment on a show about that, and he's talking about the ERA. Well, finally got his 38th vote. Yeah, like 40 years too late, 50 years too late.
Not to mention the fact that in the meantime, 5 states have rescinded it, so now you're back to 33. But
yeah. So
all right,
the ERA, for those of you who didn't know, 1972 had an expiration of 79, and then when it didn't get ratified, they added 3 more years because they were like 3 states short, and over those 3 years, they still couldn't get them, and so it finally expired completely in 82. And so, I know we're worried about the zombie apocalypses and all that jazz, but there is a fact. It is the law. You cannot resurrect amendment proposals from the dead like that. You just can't.
If not the ones that have an expiration date on them. A lot of them, the older amendments, a lot of them.
If they don't have an expiration, then they're still lingering out there. They're just waiting to be, ratified. Absolutely.
There's a number of those that, failed amendments. They are not dead. They could still be brought back to life.
Yeah, and there's a couple of them that I'm very fearful of. One of them is what's considered the original First Amendment. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
All right. Next one, keeping Americans safe in aviation. I believe this just addresses the FAA. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What's he actually trying to do here? I was talking about DEI hiring there. So that's what that's all about.
Well, here's the thing about the FAA, and I bring this up in my Constitution classes all the time. The Constitution is what gives the federal government its authorities. The FAA is not authorized. Aviation is not mentioned. Well, Doug, they weren't flying planes. This is true. But nonetheless, there could have been an amendment to the Constitution. The way the Constitution is designed is, in order for the federal government to operate on something, it has to be given that authority. And in order for that authority to be added to the Constitution, it needs to be by amendment. Am I saying then that the federal government should not be involved in aviation? Not necessarily. But right now, according to the Constitution, they don't have the authority. They have no authority over any aviation. Should they? Sure. Well, then, rather than just automatically letting the federal government just do it, let's have an amendment. And the reason why this is a big deal, the reason I bring this up is because by allowing the government to just do it, because they ought to, then that opens up the opportunity for them to open Pandora's box on other stuff. Yeah. And we really need to be going through these processes. They are there for a reason. And so I think what this administration ought to do to say, hey, because we want the Constitution to be conformed with, and we realize there is an error here, we are going to add to the Constitution the authority for the federal government to be involved in aviation and space flight, which then would actually give credence and constitutionality to the Space Force too, and the Air Force. But in the end, we need to have the authorities granted. Why? Who granted the authorities? The states. So that means they need to approve any new authorities through ratification of an amendment.
Very good. People always ask you, well, where do you draw the line? And it's a really simple answer. I draw it right at the 10th Amendment. Mm-hmm. It's crystal clear. The enumeration doctrine says if we didn't specifically enumerate this power to the government, you cannot do it. So the line's already been drawn. It was drawn very early on. We just keep crossing over it, and we keep letting them cross over it.
Yeah.
You're going to see there's a number of amendments. This next one is guaranteeing the states protection against invasion.
I wonder if that has to do with border security.
Yeah, there's a bunch of border security ones in here, and
the reason though this is interesting. Let me say this real quick about this one. This is huge. What is its name again? Scroll down. Let me see the name again. Or scroll up, should I say? The state's protection against invasion. I can't count how many people I've argued with, well, immigration is not an invasion, it's immigration. No, illegal immigration is an unwanted encroachment that violates the law. It is an invasion, especially when you consider that invasive forces such as Chinese nationalists and Middle Eastern terrorists are lumped into that group coming across that border. I am so glad that the word invasion is being used, because the reason why that's important too is because the federal government already has the authority to secure the border, but to use personnel, military personnel and or militia personnel at the border, that can only be done if it's an invasion. But if it is an invasion, Article 4, Section 4, it is the job of the federal government to defend the states against invasion.
Now, does President Trump have any authority on this topic?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the most important authorities they have.
Commander-in-Chief, man.
Let's read what they're saying here. Basically, an essential feature of any sovereign nation is the existence of boundaries. Of course, that should be.
Thomas Jefferson said, "A country with no borders is not a country."
Supreme Court has recognized the inherent right and duty of the executive branch to defend our national sovereignty. Article 4, Section 4. That's right. Yeah, it's Article 4. The Congress has, in establishing a uniform rule of naturalization, created a complex and comprehensive federal scheme. Continues, but screening under these provisions can be wholly ineffective in the border environment due to significant. I'm just skipping around, trying to see what the actual order says.
Well, it's basically saying that nobody's coming across that border without a federal vetting. And that vetting includes an immigration system of immigration protocols. And for those of you who disagree with us on this topic, you're watching a video and like, look at these right wingers or whatever. I'll ask you the same question I asked the NAACP one time when I spoke to them. when you came here or when you go somewhere? Do you lock the door of your house? And you do that not because you think everybody on the outside are a bunch of criminals, but because you recognize that a criminal element is mixed into that population and you don't want them entering your house while you're not there. And even when you're home and someone knocks on the door, you don't just throw it open and tell them to raid the fridge. You ask, who is it? You look through the little peephole. You vet them. This country is our home. The border is that front door. And all Trump is saying is, we want you to knock. We want to vet you. I love immigrants. I'm not anti-immigration. My wife is an immigrant. She naturalized, by the way, in 2007. I love immigrants, but I want them to go through the processes. By the way, my wife, being the immigrant, you think I'm harsh when it comes to that issue. Her mom and dad did it right. It's a slap in their face to just let anybody walk through, criminal elements especially.
Fully agree. The INA, which is the Immigration and Naturalization Act, provides the president with certain emergency tools. Mm-hmm. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens of any class or aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens of any class or of aliens. Or
any class. Yeah.
Okay. This has already been challenged in court when he did what they called the Muslim ban, which it was not.
Yeah, but that one was a different act. It wasn't on the INA. That was on the 1954 McCarran-Walter Act.
Well, right here they talk about the statute exudes deference to the president in every clause. Trump versus Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So Hawaii wanted to challenge it. It went to the Supreme Court. Trump won that case.
Yeah.
So this has already been adjudicated. He's in his power.
Well, remember, the executive orders are instructions to the executive branch on how to, remember we talked about this early on how to carry out the laws. Laws are being listed here. He's saying, hey, this is what the law says. This is my authority through this law. We're executing these laws.
And what he's saying here, here's the actual law, the order. He gave a lot of background on this one, but he says, by the power vested in me, blah, 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 I've determined the current situation is an invasion under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. Therefore, I, Donald Trump, blah, 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 Section 1, suspension of entry. I hereby proclaim pursuant to Sections 212F, blah, 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 that entry into the United States on or after the date of this order of aliens engaged in the invasion across the southern border is detrimental. Basically, he is suspending all entry. I therefore direct that entry in the United States of such aliens be suspended until I issue a finding that the invasion at the southern border has ceased. I wish he also mentioned the northern border, and I'm surprised he did. There's a little bit more on this, but that's enough for today on that. It's a big topic.
Basically what he's saying is suspending everything until he's decided that the invasion has ceased, and then they'll go back to immigration protocols as put into place by law. And one of the arguments when it comes to the Democrats and Biden just letting anybody in is their argument is that we don't need immigration reform, just follow the law. The law is already there. When they say immigration reform, what they mean is to get rid of the law.
I think there's another act we're going to get to where he actually authorizes the military as well, but we'll get to that. Let's just keep going in the order we're going in. Unfortunately, the White House didn't group it by topic. But there's more, and we're going to go through these because there's some interesting language in a couple of the orders, and some of it.
Restoring names that honor American greatness is a huge one, in my opinion.
We already did McKinley, Mount McKinley.
Well, and the thing is here is this is this woke garbage. You want to protect people from whatever. Well, first of all, McKinley. The reason why they want to protect people from McKinley is because he was what we would consider today quite the constitutional conservative president, vice president, even more so. I think they were both killed because of that. That's just me. But also when you get into restoring names to honor their American greatness, but even these, and pardon me if this bothers you, and actually don't pardon me because I don't care if it bothers you, Indian names. And the thing about that is what the left is saying about Indian names is actually the opposite of what they're doing. We're trying to honor them by not having their names used on. The reason their names are being used or Indian words are being used is to honor. So if you erase the presence of the Indian culture because you keep changing everything away from their names, what do you have? A culture that becomes forgotten. So they're actually doing the exact opposite of what they're claiming to do to protect that particular culture. All I know is I want the Washington Redskins to return. And the Cleveland Indians while we're at it.
They never went anywhere in my vernacular.
Yeah. But hey, I was watching Major League the other day, and I was just enjoying watching the Indian logo. But anyway.
So there's a little interesting background on this. We have what was called the Naming Committee. It was created by congressional law. Basically, it was passed by Republicans. One thing we all know is what communists always want to do is erase the past. This is George Orwell, 1984.
Sure.
He controls the past, controls the present. He controls the present, controls the future. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to relitigate the entire past and change it. Why did Republicans vote? And they're doing this. A lot of it's taking away names off of memorials of anybody who had anything to do with the Confederacy. Because, oh my God, slavery. Even though the vast majority of people in the South never owned slaves.
And those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. So, hey, let's forget about the Confederacy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The reason is, why would Republicans pass this bill? And it comes down to the military. We had a woke military where the entire woke mind virus is fully indoctrinated all the way up to the 4- and 5-star generals up to the Pentagon. And they basically told the states that get a lot of money from the military bases and military contractors, you don't vote for this, you're not getting any military money. We'll move our bases elsewhere. We'll move our production elsewhere. Someone else will get the bid. It was a financial blackmail on red states, or a lot of, and the
politicians are good at that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So this is good, good step. Let's go to the next one. Designating cartels and others as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists.
What that does, that gives the president the authority then to use force.
Yes, but on Mexican soil, Doug, what is the implications of that?
Well, it'd be it's funny because what comes to mind is Gaza. When people talk about Israel's right to defend themselves against Gaza and take troops in, and everybody acts like it's a different country, and in many ways it is. Israel pulled out of there 20 years ago. But then I ask, well, if Mexico was lobbing missiles in the United States, wouldn't it be our right for us to be able to go and defend our country and send in the troops? Well, they are sending missiles into our country, but it's called fentanyl, and it's called gang cartel members, and so on and so forth. This is a war that's being waged against us across our border. And if it is labeled as a war, if it is not just a criminal organization, but worse, a terrorist organization, and this is a war, then it gives us every authority, just like Israel had the authority to go into Gaza after having their own people slaughtered on October 7th. We're having our own people slaughtered by fentanyl and other means. Should we not then have every authority to go into that region? Now, I would hope, and I don't know the details of this right now, I'm going by just what little I know. I would hope that the President Trump is going to try to discuss this with the reigning leadership at the time in Mexico, but these cartels are outside that. It's like the Afghanistan government and Taliban. Taliban's not a part of their government. It is the problem. The cartel's not part of the government. Well, in some ways they are, but they are the problem, and it needs to be dealt with. And Mexico's not dealing with them, and it is crossing the border, and it is affecting us. It is killing Americans. So now the question is, does he have the authority to do this by executive order, or does there need to be a law in place?
There is a law in place. It's called the Alien Enemies Act. It is 50 U.S.C. 21, and he is ordering the State Department to prepare for any decision he makes to invoke the act. So they are doing preparations. That has not been invoked yet. We did see, what is her name? The new Mexican president, Claudia, Sheinbaum, something like that. I'm sorry, I should have that.
It's like a Jewish name.
Yeah. She's basically said, we agree that the cartels are a problem, but Mexico is a sovereign territory. The cartels have actually been at war with the Mexican army, which is highly corrupt, and that's why it hasn't been that successful. They're very well armed. In fact, I think if you actually saw a conflict, you see a lot of American arms that we left in Afghanistan in the hands of the cartels.
Right.
So we'll be fighting against our own stuff.
See, so we got the stuff from in Afghanistan, the hands of the cartels, the Muslim fighters, Ukraine. Just thinking out loud.
If they really want to hit the cartels where it hurts, you basically get their bank accounts. There are a number of banks, HSBC being the most famous, and back in the day, BCCI, the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International, which which Colonel Watkins and I did a long, about a 5-part series on. So if you're interested in the how banks work with these cartels and other criminal organizations, that's the place to go for that. It's on my channel under the the Shadow State series. Just look for BCCI. Long story short, if you want to shut down the cartels, you shut down their money. And the banks obviously allow them to launder money. There's other ways they launder money. They buy real estate in America. That can be stopped. Did you know that the National Association of Realtors has lobbied to keep for over 3 or 4 decades now? They have an exemption from the anti-money laundering provisions. They do not have to know their customer in real estate.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's why so many cartel members own real estate in Florida, and there's a big lobbyist effort to keep that going. So you want to hit these guys, get them financially, and he does mention the OMB in the
hit them in the pocketbook. And that's an old saying. You want to get them, hit them in the pocketbook.
Follow the money. The other thing you want to do, you want to shut down the cartels. Just shut down the CIA. Yeah, I went there.
Yeah. Hey, you're starting to sound like Kamala. That's right. I said that.
Next one, we got reform in the federal hiring process and restoring merit to government service. Once again, this is affirmative action. Do you want to go into that deeper? Or
that one is real simple. It directly pertains to the federal government and even more so the executive branch. And so he has every authority to do so.
Okay. Next one is very similar, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing.
Same thing.
Yeah, and this is great. And I think it's very popular. There is a huge DEI industry, not just in the corporate world, but in the NGO world and academia. There are entire, departments of DEI. They're teaching this stuff. I don't know how many. I mean, there's a large chunk of our population that is going to be out of work or redefined, and we see this. There's someone at the ATF. I don't remember her name, but she was 2 days ago. She was listed as a DEI officer, and now she's like a senior executive. They changed her name on the website. Her job titles probably haven't changed at all. So they're going to try to hide from this, and the enforcement of it's going to be really interesting.
Well, and what's funny is with the advent of the Trump presidency and this attitude towards DEI, you're starting to see it a little bit in the mainstream. And I saw a commercial the other day, and it's one of those hiring companies like Indeed. I can't remember if it was Indeed, but and it has this woman who is she's interviewing for a position at a hotel and says, "Well, do you have a degree?" And she says, "Well, no, but I have all this hotel experience. In other words, merit." And he says, "Well, you have to have a degree." And she says, "Well, what kind of degree?" "Oh, any degree, just as long as you have a degree." She's like, "Well, what's your degree in?" He goes, "Dance." And so, and it was kind of making fun of this. And that's the whole point, is getting back to merit based. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I've hired, over the last 20 years, I've interviewed and hired a number of people. A lot of them fresh out of college. I look at his resumes. I start seeing stuff like Ivy Leagues, and I don't want them because I'm going to have to unteach them a bunch of garbage before I can teach them their job. What I look for in a resume, I want someone who's worked as a waiter, waitress, bartender. I want to see someone who's worked retail. You're in a position where you have to interact with the public when you don't get to choose which public's going to be in front of you on a daily basis. You've got to have those kind of people skills, which are more valuable in business than any underwater basket weaving or DEI course you took. So,
underwater basket weaving, I like that.
All right, let's keep going. We got enough time to do a few more, and okay. I guess this is going to be part one because this.
Oh yeah. I had a feeling.
Yeah, well, I forgot who I was doing the show with because I thought we'd be able to go bullet point by bullet point, but in case y'all haven't noticed, every once in a while, Doug likes to wax poetic on a topic.
Well, it needs to. I mean, we want the context, right?
Sure.
Context is everything.
I'm chastising myself for forgetting that when I tried to play on the pace of this.
Yeah, but you make it sound like it's a bad thing. It's a good thing to be kind.
The reason we have you on here, Doug, we want to hear your monologues. All right, defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government.
I love that name. That is almost reeks of the way the left likes to name theirs. But it's exactly to the point and to the truth.
Biological truth. I don't need to know the purpose. We know the purpose.
See, just follow the science. Science matters. Well, at least in biology.
Okay, here are the policies and definitions. This is great.
Right.
Sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. And no more prefer not to say, no more, other fill in the blank. Every federal form around the country is going to have to be redone. Because
no more pronoun tyranny.
Men or boys shall mean adult or juvenile human males, etc. He's actually defining what a boy and girl is.
Now, has Ketanji Brown Jackson had a chance to look at this? Is what I want to know.
Well, I don't think she'll be able to rule on it. If this gets challenged at the Supreme Court, she's going to have to recuse herself because she doesn't know the difference between a man or a woman. She can't define it.
But Matt Walsh could probably be brought in, So.
Yeah, I'd bring him as an expert witness on that one. Yeah. That's a joke at his Matt Walsh's video. What is a woman?
Yes, yeah. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing. I've only seen clips, but the guy's awesome. Yeah, he did a very good job. But anyway, continue.
Recognizing women are biologically distinct. Okay, we call that common sense. Each agency shall enforce laws governing sex-based rights, protections, opportunities. No more women. Yeah, basically, this is fun reading, but we don't need to go too much deeper. We get the point. And again, he's directing where federal funds can be spent. This is a big one. So whereas the federal government does not have authority over private companies, they certainly can influence companies that are getting federal dollars. And that's using the power of the purse to make change. Now, again, a lot of these companies are going to pretend to comply. So the devil's going to be in the details and the execution. This one right here establishes the Department of Government Efficiency, apparently without Vivek Ramaswamy. I believe that's now confirmed because I was going back and forth. It started as a rumor from a couple of left-wing mainstream media outlets, and then it was denied. But I believe that is now confirmed from a tweet from the Department of Government Efficiency's own website or own Twitter account. It says that Vivek will not be joining.
Now, and the thing is, what we're talking about is presidential impound abilities. So you have appropriation of funds, which is determined by Congress. But the president is the executive branch is the one that actually does the spending. The appropriations by Congress, the spending is done by the president. The question is, can the president not spend the money if he decides? That's called impoundment. And the first example of impoundment was actually Thomas Jefferson. What had happened was money had been given for him to build a larger naval force out of New Orleans to patrol the Mississippi River to protect our side of the Mississippi River. But then after the Louisiana Purchase, that was no longer required. And so the president impounded those funds. In other words, did not spend those funds. So, and that's the precedent. So the question is, can the president say, you know what? I'm not going to spend the funds on that. I'm going to withhold the funding. Can he do that? There is precedent. And Trump said during the campaign that he was going to use his impoundment powers. And that's what he's doing here. He's basically saying, okay, so if this federal money is going to something that will promote DEI, then we're not going to give the money. We're going to impound those funds. So from that point of view, he has every authority to do this.
And again, there's an awful lot of federal workers who have been doing just the opposite. They've been trying to strong-arm companies, forcing them to have DEI policies. That's all going to be reversed, and you're probably going to have to replace the people in those jobs pretty quickly because they were, shall we say, rather militant about their mission. They were true believers.
Right.
This next one's pretty fun. America First policy directive to the Secretary of State. In a nutshell, if it benefits everything you do must benefit America and not other countries. Put America first. Where it's interesting is the State Department has an awful lot of authority over USAID spending. USAID is where an awful lot of the NGOs that are aiding and abetting illegal immigration, they get a lot of those NGOs that get their money from USAID. This is a huge amount of money that now is going to not be spent on anti-American activities. This is a big deal. It's very simple. From this day forward, the foreign policy of the United States shall champion core American interests and always put America and American citizens first. The fact that that needs to be said is rather alarming, or should be.
Yeah.
He's telling the Secretary of State, this is a short one, nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted to law by an executive department, the functions of the director of OMB. OMB is going to be mentioned a lot in these executive orders. That's the Office of Budget and Management. They're basically the bookkeepers, the accountants of the federal purse. Very, very important position, especially in the Trump administration. It's going to wield a lot of power. They're going to be working hand in hand with DOJ, and this is a big deal. But you'll see OMB popping up over and over again. So nothing specific in this, just basically guideline, America first, because you work for America. I'm not a Marco Rubio fan. He got confirmed 99-0.
Well, it's because he's part of the establishment, and so they think they might be able to control him. But this conversation came up with my wife the other day, and because she was asking me about Rubio, and I told her, here's the thing about the establishment Republicans. If there is a better or worse scale for establishment Republicans, in my opinion, he's one of the better ones, but he still does have one foot in the establishment. And by that, I mean is those who operate for the sake of the bureaucracy, have one foot in the machine, in the Leviathan, and feed from the trough of that Leviathan. And so we'll see. Now, that said, as I told my wife, as a Christian, I do believe that people can change. They can see the light. So we'll see.
Well, he was on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, which investigated the Russiagate and came out and said, despite having no evidence of this, and they knew that this wasn't true, they said that Trump did collude with Russia. And so his signature is on that. So if he wants to retract that, we'll talk about forgiveness. One thing I will point out, though, Marco Rubio becoming Secretary of State, that is actually going to be the pinnacle of his career because, as we know, he's not eligible to be president or vice president because he's not a natural-born citizen. So he has reached the highest level in our government he ever can legally. He made it.
How many Secretary of States have you seen become president later? Now, don't get me wrong, James Madison was a good one. But typically, how many Secretary of States move on to become president?
Not very many over the last, say, 150 years. But
right.
And what's interesting is an awful lot of our secretaries of state have always been drawn from the establishment. There are a ton of Skull and Bones members. This is a really small club. In fact, there's about 5 or 6 that are all related to each other throughout the years. Our foreign policy has been decided by a bunch of plutarchs and oligarchs. This is, if you're not one of the blue blood families, you don't get that position. Rubio is a bit of an exception on the blue blood part. But that being said, he's always been a patron of the military-industrial complex. They're happy with it. And that's why when he gets there 99-0, you should be alarmed. I don't like it.
Exactly.
I don't like it. I'd like to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
All right, next one. We got time for a couple more. We'll try to kill this around 90 minutes.
Okay.
Next one is protect. And by the way, you in the audience, we're always trying to experiment about what the proper length of video you want to see. Let us know in the comments because sometimes we go 60, sometimes 90. I don't think we do too many 2 hours, but there are shows that go that long. So how long do you guys want these to be?
And we get hammered into our head all the time. Well, you really don't have a video longer than a minute and a half because people don't have that type of attention span. If you're really into a topic, you do have the attention span. Some people, they'll watch part of it and go back and finish it. And so we understand that some people have a short attention span. Some people do want that meat and they do want the longer, but we are curious. So yeah, please let us know. You can either do so in the comment section, which is the best place to do it, or you can email me at constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com.
Very good. Next one we have is protecting the United States from foreign terrorists and other national and public safety threats. Kind of touched on
and that kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier about us needing to take things like the cartels and Islam seriously.
I'm just trying to, and does he have the authority to do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to see. There's some
laws are in place. It is one of the first when it comes down to the authority. Two things have to be asked. One, is it a federal authority according to the Constitution? And number two, is there a law in place? If there's a law in place and it's a constitutional law, he has every authority. Now, that said, his job is to execute the laws of the United States. And so even if something's unconstitutional, he's supposed to still carry it out. And if it needs to be reversed, the legislature has to do so. But the real question is there a law in place? And since Kennedy, there's been a requirement that the laws that an executive order affects must be in the executive order. And so typically with these executive orders, you'll see a law in place that it is carrying out.
Yeah, right here, you'll see it pursuant to Section 212F of the INA. They always cite a law. Most of this EO is about vetting and screening, but there's an important part. He says within 60 days, this is a real key provision of this order, the State, Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security and the DNI shall jointly submit to the President through the Assistant President for a report. Here it goes. Identifying countries throughout the world for which vetting and screening information is so deficient as to warrant a partial or full suspension on the admission of nationals from those countries. That's a big one because it's kind of open-ended. If, for example, Mexico is not vetting and screening the people coming through their border, do we shut down the border altogether? This also creates, they're going to say it's going to be like the Muslim ban, but that's already been ruled on.
Well, and he's carrying out Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution here. Because first of all, when it comes to national security threats, that's where his commander-in-chief position comes. But he's also asking his department heads to give him written reports. So here's what Article 2, Section 2 says. The President shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and the militia of the several states. When called into actual service in the United States, he may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer of each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. So that's what he's carrying out in the Constitution there.
Yeah, and this does not impact TSA because, it does to some degree. They do deal with it on the international airports. I guess the point I'm getting at is just because they're increasing the vetting and screening on foreigners, they should not be doing so on Americans. In fact, I think they ought to get rid of a lot of the stuff they do to screen Americans.
Yeah, but don't worry, man. We got the real ID now.
Yeah. How many people... I just got to renew my passport, and it turns out I don't need a real ID. I can still get my TSA pre-check just with my passport. So I didn't do the real ID.
Well, I actually finally gave in a couple weeks ago and got my real ID. But because while people complain about the real ID, and they've been asking me, and this is kind of a side note, asking me if it's even constitutional. And the reality is, unfortunately, it actually technically is. While a national ID is not required, as long as it remains a state ID, Congress can establish how those IDs are going to, what provisions or what standard they're going to meet. Article 4, Section 1, full faith and credit shall be given each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every state, and the Congress may, by general laws, prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, proceedings shall be proved and the effects thereof. So Congress can pass a law saying, hey, you're going to have this provision or this standard with your IDs. Still up to you on how you do it, but there are certain standards that need to be met, and the real ID is basically falls within that. I'm not happy with it because I think it's a step towards national IDs, which I think are unconstitutional.
How about a national voter ID?
Well, once again, that's a good question. How about we just check the IDs? Why do we need a national voter ID? Just check the ID to make sure. And then, of course, the states with the real ID says, oh, it's not an illegal alien. So, and in my case, my license, the only difference between my old license and my new one is there's a little star in the upper right-hand corner, which tells you it's a real ID. But But I think that could be utilized for the purpose of voter ID.
Let's. This is probably a pretty good place to stop. We need to do another episode on this, and once we get off stop recording, we'll talk about how quickly we can get another one out there, because it's an important topic and this is happening in real time.
Well, we went through the first 2 pages, and how many pages are there?
Let me see.
I know there's more than 4, although 4 was shown on the screen at the time. There's a lot of executive orders, and some of them we could pass by, but there's a lot of important things there. And I think you need to not only be informed about their constitutionality, but a lot of people don't even know they exist. He did what? And then they hear what the other side has to say about describing it without having the groundwork on it. And so that's where it's really important that you receive that right here on this channel.
There are 6 pages total, so we can probably get to the next 4 in one episode, because we're not.
Perhaps
we won't be starting with Birthright Citizenship, because we knew that was going to be a long one. So over the 2 pages we went through.
Did I even breathe at all while I was talking? No, never mind. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you let me get a word in every once in a while. That's why this has been for those who don't know, this has been one of Doug's pet topics for a very long time.
Birthright Citizenship. I did videos on it a long time ago. Matter of fact, back during his first term.
And we've just done some even more recently. So we knew that was going to be a little long-winded, but it's important, and it is going to be. It's a big one. But of the 2 pages we went through, Doug, was there a single one that we said that he was overstepping his authority?
No. That's interesting, because I can say that about almost every one of Biden's.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Now, Trump is hardly a strict constitutionalist. He's not an original intent guy. He's more of a Straussian, Lincolnian, big government Republican. But
not only that, but it's like people, we talk about the Republican Party. He's not a Republican in the sense of what the Republicans have been for the last century. He's not a conservative. He's not a constitutionalist, but he is a pragmatic businessman who seems to have ideas of common sense that, match conservative constitutional ideas. And he's remade the GOP in his own image, which I'm totally okay with. So it's fascinating to watch.
He may even have proposed some amendments, and the guys around him said, no, you can't do that. I think he's got some better people around him, because he's got the tendency to just, he'll start just throwing everything that comes out of his mouth.
Yeah, see, in his speeches, his inaugural speech and other things, I've noticed he's not the same guy back 2016. And I've been saying this all along. Thank God the Democrats stole the 2020 election, because what happened was Trump got in on the inside, saw how bad it was, trusted a lot of people he shouldn't have trusted. Then during that 4 years that he was not president, in their arrogance, they all exposed who they were, what they were all about, and now he's going in the wiser man. And I think this is truly could be, I'm not making any predictions, but it could be the beginning of a golden age.
Yeah, that's what we all hope for. Last thing I'll say about Trump is he's got a chance to go down as one of the more constitutional presidents, not because that's necessarily his instinct. And he says a lot of things that are the wrong interpretation of the Constitution. We're going to get to that in the next episode of this, because there's some.
Yeah, but then you'll see him come back later a little bit.
Maybe sometimes. Yeah, he still says the word democracy too much. My point is the reason he's such a constitutional president is because he is under the magnifying glass of so many people. If he does anything unconstitutional, they're going to run to the courts, they're going to run to the media and call him a dictator and everything like that. If he wasn't such a constitutional president, they wouldn't have had to make up 2 fake impeachments. They would have done it for something real.
Right.
All right, Doug, let's wrap it up. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and give any closing thoughts?
Okay, DouglasVGibbs.com and YouTube.com/DouglasVGibbs, Rumble.com/DouglasVGibbs. I also have radio programs, one of them on KMET 1490 AM on Saturdays from 1 to 3 Pacific. The other 2 are on KPRZ and KCBQ. You can listen to them live at those websites at 8 p.m. KCBQ.com Saturday Pacific time, or KPRZ.com 9 p.m. Saturday night, or later on any, and I mean just about any of the podcast platforms, iHeartRadio, Amazon Prime, whatever. Just look up Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs. And the last two were doozies. I have integrated the preamble into the Trump presidency. Have fun with that one. And of course, DouglasVGibbs.com. Help fund the shows. The radio programs are not fully funded. Always need assistance in funding those programs. DouglasVGibbs.com. Hit the join link, and you can become a $9 a month patron, or just go down to the bottom of the first page when you go to DouglasVGibbs.com and hit the thing that says donate, and you can send some money my way to help fund these programs. And I will sign out the way I always like to sign out before I hand it back over to my good friend Brady the War Hamster. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Doug, thanks for coming on. Everybody, please check me out on Twitter and Truth. On Twitter, X. It's war_hamster1776, and on Truth Social, it's war_hamster. There you will find me quite often correcting people's misperceptions on constitutional issues. I occasionally summon Doug to come join in those arguments.
Every once in a while.
So if you're interested in the constitutional stuff and having somebody who's done the research, shutting up some of the internet clowns who think they know what they're talking about, give me a follow. The last thing is
don't let Elon, by the way, hear you calling it Twitter now. You be careful there.
I still go to Twitter. If I go to twitter.com, it still shows up. So until that stops, it's still, I don't know. It's like a difference between a Coke and a soda at this point. Well, last thing I was going to say is if you like the Re-Federalist Report, we're really close to start doing this live. I believe the time slot we're shooting for is going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'll keep everyone updated as soon as we get that nailed down. If that's the case, you'll see Douglas V. Gibbs joining me whenever he gets the opportunity. It will be an open invitation, but same kind of topics. Probably have a few other guests, and I'll be announcing it when it goes live soon. Thanks everyone for watching. Cheers, and have a great weekend.